tell us about what's happening with Clearview AI and the Information Commissioner.
Thank you, Brian. Further emphasis on the confusion and the potential perils surrounding artificial intelligence, and in this case, particularly facial recognition and the lack of thought that's gone into its regulation. So the issue that I want to bring up is the Information Commissioner, who last year attempted to fine Clearview for a breach by way of harvesting data that they shouldn't have been able to. And their tribunal has ruled against the Information Commissioner. So we'll just go on one and look at the detail from that tribunal, which was heard last year, gave a decision in October this year. And I'll just take a little bit of text out of that decision, which are the reasons. Number one, so if we click on one, we have concluded that the Information Commissioner did not have jurisdiction to issue the enforcement notice and the monetary penalty notice to Clearview AI, because although the processing undertaken by Clearview was related to the monitoring of data subjects' behaviour in the United Kingdom, the processing is beyond the material scope of the GDPR and is not relevant processing for the purposes of Article 3 UK GDPR. So you might be wondering, really, what is the purpose of GDPR and how can a jurisdictional issue have played such a part in this to effectively render the Information Commissioner utterly powerless? So we'll just bring a quote from him on screen now. He's a man named John Edwards, and he said in respect of this decision, he said, "I fully respect the role of the tribunal to provide scrutiny of my decisions, but as the defender of the public's privacy, I need to challenge this judgment to clarify whether commercial enterprises profiting from processing digital images of UK people are entitled to claim that they are engaged in law enforcement." He goes on, "It is my job to protect the data rights of the people of the United Kingdom, and it is my view that there are too many who are being affected by the sheer scale and intrusiveness of Clearview's mass scraping of personal information." And he concludes by saying, "This is an important issue within the AI sphere, and whilst my office supports businesses that innovate with AI solutions, we will always take the appropriate action to protect UK people when we believe their privacy rights are not being respected." So, in effect, he hits the nail on the head there by talking about Clearview, in effect, carrying on activities that appear to be in flagrant breach of the regulations around data harvesting. But because they say that it specifically refers to law enforcement, they in effect seem to be able to get away with it. So we'll just have a quick look at Clearview. If you don't particularly recall the name, they have been mentioned on UK Column a number of times, and they boast of having a database of 40 billion, over 40 billion facial images, from which, of course, all sorts can be done with regard to facial recognition and how exactly that can be used, or more specifically, abused. They then go on, if we click on one, we'll just look at the way they describe their support for US law enforcement agencies. So they talk about accelerating your investigations and that their revolutionary investigative platform enables quicker identifications and apprehensions to help solve and prevent crimes, helping to make our communities safer. So there may be a grain of truth in that. However, first of all, are they going about it in the correct manner? Secondly, has the legal system in effect caught up at all? And then we have to look at the application of this. So the next slide shows a fact sheet from the Home Office about the police use of facial recognition in the United Kingdom. And if we click on one, we'll see that in the text from that fact sheet, we have a statement saying that following a possible live facial recognition alert, it is always a police officer on the ground who will decide what action, if any, to take. As with normal investigations, the investigating officer must form reasonable grounds to suspect the person identified is responsible for the commission of an offence and that there is justification for an arrest. The standard procedures for investigation, evidence collection, arrest, charge, and prosecution are followed. I think the question here really is whether it's the tail wagging the dog or not. Is it realistic to think that police will be thinking on their own feet when they've been told, in effect, by a computer that such and such a person has commissioned an offence. So is there potential for this to go wrong? Most certainly. We'll look back on the next slide at a study from 2016 reported on by the Innocence project, when artificial intelligence gets it wrong. And if we go on one, of course, the counter-argument will be that this is now some years out of date and that it works better and all the rest of it. But this goes back to a Georgetown University study in 2016, and they allowed police officers to run or request to have facial recognition searches run against their driver's license and ID databases. Based on this figure, the centre estimated that 1 in 2 American adults has their image stored in a law enforcement facial recognition network. Presumably that figure will be much higher now. Furthermore, given the disproportionate rate at which African Americans are subject to arrest, the centre found that facial recognition systems that rely on mugshot databases are likely to include an equally disproportionate number of African Americans. So again, it touched on by almost every other aspect of policing. The racial issue doesn't seem to have really been brought out, at least not where Clearview is concerned. Just go on for last quote here from the police chief, who says, James Craig, Detroit police chief, saying that if the city's officers were to use facial recognition by itself, it would yield misidentifications 96% of the time, which, okay, is a statistic, and they have to question exactly how he's come by it. But nonetheless, it is a perfectly staggering figure to put out that it could be this inaccurate. So in addition to the legal and technical and other issues, we've then got the idea of effectively sort of impartial or objective use of it. And is it going to be law enforcement agencies deciding upon how they use it or not? What influence does Clearview itself have over the application of its tools? So we'll go on and have a look at what they've been doing in Ukraine.
Sorry.
And they are very proud to state that when Clearview employees saw the images of the destruction from the Ukraine and Russia war, the team began brainstorming different ways our technology could be used to help. Well, what do they mean by that? Their chief executive wrote a letter to the Ukrainian government listing several potential use cases for our technology that could help Ukraine defend itself against the Russian invasion, which included reuniting refugees separated from their families, identifying Russian operatives, and helping the government debunk false social media posts related to the war. So we'll just click on one before we summarize, but they then have a sort of highlights part to this, which is saying that you can read more about how Clearview has helped the Russian and Ukrainian war, how facial recognition technology can make the world safer, and the implications for future wartime conflicts. And then Time magazine had a piece entitled Ukraine's Secret Weapon Against Russia is a Controversial US Tech Company. So if we think back to what we've looked at already, first of all, the legal and the technical things, but now we have an astonishing bias. So we're really to imagine that in terms of law enforcement, that Clearview itself is not in some way going to be able to act in such a manner, or at least spike the system in such a manner that it will behave, in effect, with a mind of its own. And also specifically with Ukraine and Russia, it provides a very good example. If we know that it's able to make mistakes, and indeed a lot of mistakes, how on earth in a situation involving combatants can there be any certainty that it's correctly identifying those sorts of people on the ground? So this case with the Information Commissioner's Office is one that we will continue to follow at UK Column, because it really does expose the many, many issues that have not been considered and have not been bottomed out by the government or indeed the corporate entities that are dealing with this, much less so the police.
Charles, thank you very much for that. Lots of questions there. More money for the police, more surveillance, but we can't trust the surveillance that we are getting. Is it keeping us safe? I didn't get that impression.